Hello everyone, and today I will be showing you how to make your own custom Windows build using a tool called NTLite, which is for Windows 7 and up. Now, I am using the Pro version of this, which costs about £40, but most of the things I'll be doing are also available in the free version. So, you will need a Windows 11 disk image for this. I have all of mine loaded here, so I'm just going to select the Windows 11 one and press New Edit. And then it's just going to go and load the disk image. And now, what I would recommend doing, if yours is a multi-edition like mine, is unless you plan on using different editions, delete every edition that you don't need, which there is an option for at the end, or you can do it manually now, but I'm just going to do it at the end. So I'm going to select the edition that I want, which for me would be Pro N, which is just Pro but slightly less bloated. Press load, and wait for it to load the image. And then once it's loaded and read the data, you'll see there's now a bunch of different options over here. So the first one I'm going to do is updates. Now, if you have your own update files or installers, you can add them from here. But for most people, I just recommend to do latest online updates, and you'll see there are a bunch of new ones from the last time I did this. So it should work just fine if you select all of them and press in queue. And you might get some warnings or errors if the updates are already on the disk image you're using. And then drivers, if you want to import the same drivers from the machine you're making this build from, you can just hit this here, and you can also view the list of devices, including hidden devices based on this switch here, for all of the devices that will be needed if you're installing on the exact same machine. Then you can add any registry keys or post setup scripts if you want to. And then you can choose which components to remove. So for me, I'm just going to remove everything that I don't need. So like Bing, the video editor, Cortana, Feedback Hub. And if you don't know what an app does, for example, I don't know what Flipgrid PWA is, it just shows the description next to it, so you can decide whether you need it or not. Things that I definitely would recommend keeping are like file openers like Microsoft Photos, and things like Microsoft Mail and Calendar, because from my experience, trying to remove Mail and Calendar can just break the Windows experience itself. So I'm just going to continue removing all the programs that I don't want. Windows Alarms and Clock is another one that I'd recommend you keep, just for a similar reason to Mail and Calendar. Then the drivers section, unless you're planning on making a really minimal image, I would leave these be. Same for hardware support, ISO image, localization, network. The rest you can just mess around with if you want. And then, once you've removed any components that you want to remove, you can... This is a premium feature. You can remove existing scheduled tasks. So, I might want to remove the BitLocker tasks because I don't want it to automatically encrypt my drives. And then in features, you can enable or disable any features that you want. So I'm going to enable .NET Framework because it's useful for some applications. Enable Hyper-V because it's good for virtual machines. And now once I've done all them, you can go into settings. Now auto-logger tracing, for most people I wouldn't worry about this, just because they're quite unimportant. It's just what information gets logged on informations like booting or a blue screen. And crash control, you can choose whether to automatically or manually reboot whenever there's a blue screen. Whether to write an event to the system log, this is similar. And how much debugging information to write. So I will just do a complete memory dump because it gives more information. Then if you want, you can choose the accent color to apply when you first sign in, although this doesn't apply to everything and is quite broken, so I just leave it as the default and change it later. Allow pinning store apps to taskbar, change the alt tab style to classic or normal, enable animation effects or not, change the fit for the desktop image, which I'm going to set to stretch, choose whether to enable the classic context menu, which I have enabled right now. So instead of looking like the normal Windows 11 right-click menu, it just looks like the Windows 10 one. Choose whether to enable dark mode for apps and for Windows. Choose which desktop icons to enable or disable. So for me, I'm going to hide all of those icons except Recycle Bin. Set the desktop icon size. Choose whether for Windows to automatically lock your device when you're away using Bluetooth. Enable or disable the notification center on the taskbar, which is this thing here. Choose whether notifications can use the network to send or display information. Choose whether to display the logon screen on resume. Allow or disable pinning stuff to the taskbar. Pointer acceleration, which I'm going to turn off because I personally find it annoying. Choose whether to enable or disable quiet hours, which I'm going to disable since I don't need it. Now, this does not disable searching in the taskbar, it just changes the status of the search icon. You can either have it set to the box, the icon, or just nothing. So I'm going to disable it so there's no icon, so you can see on my real taskbar there's no icon here. Then select the far corner of the taskbar to show the desktop, which is this thing down here. If I click it, it minimizes everything. Show the accent color on the start and taskbar, and on the title bars or window borders. You might like this, but I'm going to disable it because I personally think it looks ugly. Show people on the taskbar. I don't think most people will need this. Show the lock screen background picture on the sign-in screen. This is just a nice QOL fix. Now, some things like this one might not have both enabled and disabled. They might just have one of them and default, which likely means that default just refers to the other one. And the start layout, you can choose more pins or the normal one. And then the taskbar alignment, I'm going to set it to the left. Choose whether to show the chat icon on the taskbar, which I'm going to turn off. Choose whether to have the classic taskbar, which does disable the start menu, so I'm not going to, or I'll just leave it as the default. Whether to show the taskbar on all monitors, which I will. Set the taskbar size, which I'll just leave as the default again. Choose whether to enable small icons, the widgets menu, which I'll disable, whether to install Teams, which I'll also disable, whether to tile the wallpaper, which doesn't really matter because I've set the wallpaper mode to stretch, and whether to use the print screen button to open screen snipping, and I would enable that since normally the print screen button just on your desktop doesn't do anything. Event viewer channels, again, not much most people would have to worry about, so I'll just leave it as it is. Now, Explorer, I always show more details in a file copy dialog, so like when you're copying something instead of just the progress bar, it has the graph, autoplay, which just brings up a menu whenever you plug something in. I find that annoying, so I'm going to turn it off. Balloon notifications, which is like the Windows 7 notifications, I'm just going to leave it as the default since I prefer modern notifications. Choose whether to enable or disable CD burning features. I'm going to leave them on. Clear history of recently opened documents when you close Explorer. That can save space, but it doesn't take up that much space to begin with, so I'll just leave it as is. Command prompt in the directory, shift right click context menu, or just if you have the Windows 10 context menu enabled, the regular one. So you'll see if I go in Explorer and right click, then there's open command window here and the same thing as admin in the context menu. So I'm going to enable that. In the control panel, which is not settings, you can choose whether to enable classic view and small icons, but control panel is barely used for anything in Windows 11, so I'm going to leave it. Decrease space between items, compact view. Now, it might make things look a bit crammed at first, but this just makes Explorer look exactly the same as it did in Windows 10. So it's just kind of an illusion given by Windows 11, really. Display file size information in folder tips. There's not really a reason why you'd want to leave this off. Display icons instead of thumbnails. I'm not entirely sure what this does, but I think it just displays, like for files like images, which can have a thumbnail of what the image is, it just displays like the generic file type icon instead. And you can choose the same thing, but only on network folders. You can hide folder merge conflicts, which I haven't really tried, so I'm not entirely sure what it does. Keep a history of recently opened documents. Launch folder windows in a separate process. I would just disable this because otherwise it can eat up system resources. Navigation pane automatically expand to current folder, and then you can choose whether to show all this in your navigation pane, which in Explorer is like this thing here on the side. And then you can choose where to open the File Explorer to. So you can either have your home folder, this PC, and that's it. So I'm going to choose open to this PC. You can toggle the preview pane and quick access, and display the delete confirmation dialog, as in asking, are you sure, when you empty the recycle bin. So I'll show you what I mean. If I try and empty my recycle bin now, it shows this dialog instead of just emptying it immediately. So I am going to enable that. Replace command prompt with PowerShell in the start button right click menu. So if you right click the start button or press Windows and X, then you will see currently this says terminal, but if you toggled this, it would say PowerShell instead. But the modern Windows terminal, which is different to command prompt, is basically PowerShell, but I am going to enable this. Restore the old Windows Photo Viewer instead of using Windows Photos. I prefer Windows Photos, it has more stuff. Show the clock. I don't know why anyone would not want the clock down here. Show drive letters. So, as in, it would say C next to the C drive, which is usually Windows. I'm going to do drive letter before label because I prefer that. Show files from office.com. I'm going to disable that. Show the option to map or disconnect a network drive. Yeah. Show pop-up descriptions for folder or desktop icons. Yep. Show sync providing notifications from stuff like OneDrive. No, that's just ads basically. Show the task view button, which I'm going to disable because you can just open the task view thing with Windows and Tab. So you can see I don't have a task view button here. Whether to display tray items, I'll just leave that as the default. Use checkboxes to select items. I don't know why anyone would have that off apart from to save screen space if they had a small screen or a high scale. Use sharing wizard. I'm not entirely sure what that does, so I'm just going to leave it. Show empty drives. Again, no clue why anyone would have it turned off. Show extensions for known file types. Show hidden files, folders and drives. And show protected operating system files unless you want to mess about with those files in something other than the command prompt. I would just disable it because otherwise you have desktop.ini on your desktop at all times. Power control, you can choose whether to enable or disable fast startup. I'm going to disable it because it saves disk space and I already have a pretty fast machine. Whether to enable or disable hibernation, which is where it writes the contents of the memory to the disk and then turns off, so when you turn it back on, it just carries on where you left it. Whether to show the option to hibernate, lock, and sleep in the shutdown menu, and whether you can shut down the machine without logging on first. Then privacy, you can choose whether to allow apps access to things, allow experience improvement program. Most of these ones I'm going to be disabling are just, would you like people to collect your data? Automatic installation of sponsored apps. Have you ever had Candy Crush or TikTok appear on your PC without it asking you if you wanted it? Yep, let's disable that. Automatically connect to hotspots. This is kind of a security risk if your device just connects to random networks without asking you, so I'm going to disable it. Keep clipboard history, I find this useful, so I'm going to enable it. Whether to display the last username in the logon screen, most people won't have any concerns about it, so I just leave it on. Same with display locked username in logon screen. Display recent search entries in the File Explorer search box, I'll just leave that as it is. When should Microsoft ask you for feedback? Never. One of the main things people don't like about the modern Windows search is that it just searches Bing, even if you're searching for a file that is right there. So you can turn off Bing and Cloud Search and enhance Find My Files. You can also choose whether to keep search history for the Windows search bar. I would enable notifications in the Settings app for important stuff like activation, but not suggested content because then it will just yell at you to use a Microsoft account. And Copilot, who uses Copilot? And Windows Spotlight, which gives you random tips and suggestions, and sometimes ads. Next, you can choose what you want to appear in the Start menu. So I'm just gonna make it display the app list, and then the power button, I'm gonna leave all the folders as they are. You can choose whether to disable the power button or not. What to show in the power button menu. Whether to show your most used apps. Show recommendations, which I'm going to turn off. Show the user tile, which is just the little circle with your user icon in it, and whether to show these options in the user tile. Then in System, allow your control to open Xbox Game Bar. I've removed all the Game Bar applications, so I'm going to turn it off. Automatic activation. If you don't want it to automatically activate for some reason, you can turn that off. Automatic device encryption. Now, I have had a friend be completely locked out of his Windows install and have to reinstall because BitLocker activated itself without telling him, and he didn't know his recovery key. So yeah, turn off BitLocker by default. I don't know why it's on by default, because it has made many people just get locked out of Windows and not know what to do. You can choose whether to display the lock screen, and also DISM reset based functionality. It just lets you reset your installation to a default Windows image if you want to, so I'm going to enable that. Automatically save my restartable apps when I sign out and restart them after I sign in. This just wastes system resources in my opinion, so I'm going to turn it off. You can choose whether to enable the animation that happens when you first log on to a fresh Windows install, and then, because Windows 11 really wants you to use a Microsoft account, you can choose whether to bypass it, so I'm going to enable that. Microsoft account, there are different settings for this. A Microsoft account is allowed, you can't add a Microsoft account, and you can't add or log on with a Microsoft account. I'm just going to set it to allowed because I just want it to not enforce a Microsoft account. Then you can choose whether to enable or disable OneDrive. I'm going to disable it. Then you can choose whether it should prompt for a security warning on launching something you downloaded from an internet. Then you can choose whether it wants to display a security warning when you launch a file from the internet. Ready Boost, which uses other like flash memory devices to improve responsiveness. Remote Desktop, which most people don't need. Whether to require Windows Hello for Microsoft accounts, which no. Whether Windows should reserve storage, which, because it just improves the stability of your system. Get rid of the 4GB RAM requirement for Windows 11. Get rid of the TPM and Secure Boot requirement for Windows 11. Whether to enable sticky keys and similar accessibility tools. Storage Sense is a maintenance utility for freeing up disk space, so I will enable it. Delete files in my downloads folder. I have so much stuff in my downloads folder, so never. I normally keep most things that I download. Delete files in my recycle bin if they've been there for over, let's say, 1 day. Delete temporary files that my apps aren't using, enabled, and then you can choose when to run Storage Sense, so I'm just going to do it during low disk space only. You can change the location of the temporary directory if you want to. Use my sign-in info to automatically finish setting up my device. I'll disable that. Verbose startup, shutdown, log on and log off messages, so when you shut it down, instead of just saying shutting down, it'll tell you what it's doing and which services it's stopping, so I'm going to enable that. You can choose whether to enable virtualization-based security, and I would recommend doing that. And then the Windows installer patch cache size, I just leave it as it is, and whether to enable the Windows recovery environment, which I would recommend doing. Then you can choose which tasks to enable or disable. I'm going to disable Edge Update, and these other ones, I don't know what they do, so I'm just going to leave them as they are. Then some TCP/IP settings, user account control, which apart from limit print driver installation to administrators, which I'm going to disable, I will just leave everything else. Windows Defender, would you like Windows Defender to warn you to use a Microsoft account? No. And then disable non-critical notifications from the security center, because most of them are just similar stuff to this. Smart app control, which is, oh, you can't run this app because I said so. Now, evaluation mode is, it asks you. Off is it runs it anyway, and on is you can't run any apps that it doesn't like, so I just leave it in evaluation mode. Tamper protection, prevent others from tampering with important security features. I'll disable that because this image is mainly intended for VMs and stuff, so I might want to mess around with those files. And Windows Defender itself, I just enable it, which is leaving it as the default. Now, Windows Update, automatic driver update mode, I'm going to enable it. Automatic update of the speech models, I'm going to disable since I don't use them. Automatically update device drivers and icons over the internet, sure. Delivery optimization, this just downloads from nearby machines that already have these updates, so I'm going to set it to bypass fully and download it directly from Microsoft. Download updates over metered connections, disabled. Feature update safeguard, which blocks upgrades, so no. Get the latest updates as soon as they're available, sure. Give me updates for other Microsoft products when I update Windows, no. Include drivers with quality updates, yes, which is default. Include malicious software removal tool updates, yes. Prompt Windows update is on its way message, leave it as the default. Restart PC as soon as possible when required to install an update, that's annoying, so no. Show notification when your PC requires a restart to finish updating, yes, because then you can do it yourself and it won't do it automatically. Show me Windows welcome experience after updates, no. You can set the target release version if you want. This is for Windows 10 and 11 versions, but I just leave it as the default. Windows Store, install updates automatically. Windows Update, whether you can just disable updates outright, and Windows Update Service Download, I'm just going to set it to install updates automatically, but you can choose whether to just download automatically but not install, or to not. Then, services, I think this is again a premium feature, but the one thing that I would like to disable is Microsoft Edge Update, because that prevents Edge coming back if you force uninstall it. And there's also some extra services, which again, nothing that special really. Mainly just hardware related things. And then you can set up unattended setup. So if you leave it as default, then it just uses the default Windows OOBE. So I'm going to enable it. And if you're using multiple editions, you'll want to activate this up here, so it asks you which edition you want to install. And then you can choose whether to use OOBE or audit mode. OOBE is the standard setup configuration, and audit just brings you straight to the desktop as the administrator account. And there's also an autofill button, which you can use by interpreting settings from your current machine that you're using to make this, and it will add a local user, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna hit cancel. So again, you can see it's autofilled all my locales to British, set my time zone, and then for this, I would skip the EULA page because it just saves you pressing one button. I would not skip local account setup because otherwise you won't be able to set up an account at all if you disable Microsoft account. Skip wireless setup, network location, which is just home by default on Windows really. Skip get going fast, which is disabling telemetry, because we've done that already. Then more Windows localizations. You can choose whether to report the installation statistics to Microsoft, which should be disabled, and whether to enable dynamic update, where it updates during the OOBE, and I will enable that. And if you have a small drive, or just low disk space for VMs, then I would suggest compacting Windows so it takes up less space. And for that you can also choose whether to skip the EULA page. And if you have a product key for Windows, you can just use it here, and maybe here, but mainly this one. If you're doing it here, just don't do it here because it's unnecessary to activate Windows. But Windows 10 and 11 don't require product keys and you can use them unactivated. So I'll just leave the product key field empty and then apply. So this is what I was talking about at the start. You can choose to remove any non-essential additions that you want. So I am going to remove all of them except the one that I'm using, which is grayed out, the setup, which is grayed out, and the Windows pre-installation environment, which you can remove, but it is useful. You can change the image format if you want, but I'd leave it as Vim. Choose whether to reapply the tasks across editions, which I'm going to check all the boxes for. And then I am going to hit the big green process button up at the top. And now it will compile, which, depending on how much stuff you did, can take anywhere from 15 minutes to multiple hours. And after over an hour, it's finished building and compiling. Then you want to select the whole folder of the edit that you made, press create ISO, which makes a disk image file. Then you can just name the file whatever you want. I'm going to name it JD11SE because I've done this before, so it will be the second edition. Set the label as the same, and then it will just build the disk image file. And then once that's done, you can just, if you don't plan to make any further changes, you can delete the edit file since you've already created the disk image, and close NTLite where it will clean everything up automatically. So now in VMware, I've already created a VM for this. I'm just going to go and select the CD, DVD thing, select the disk image I've just created, and now I'm going to power it on. This already has my custom Windows 10 build installed on here, so I'm going to install over it, but the process for Windows 10 is essentially the same. So you'll see it doesn't ask you to select a language or agree to the ULA or anything, it just goes straight to setup is starting, and then it goes straight to the partition tool. So what I'm going to do is delete all the partitions that are already here and just install in the free space. And then once it's done that, instead of asking for an email address from a Microsoft account, it just asks for my name. And I'm just not going to have a password because this is a VM. And then after another check for updates, it just brings me straight to the desktop, after the welcome screen, of course. And then it asks if you want to pin Edge to your taskbar, because Windows 11. And hang on, let me change my display settings. Yeah, you'll see a bunch of command prompt windows pop up, and that is it, applying the customizations you chose. Although some of them do take a while, so you can see the taskbar isn't in dark mode, so I'll just try refreshing. And then, if you look at the apps list, you'll see there's no Copilot. OneDrive is still there despite us removing it. But yeah, there's a lot less bloat than there would be normally. You can see the theme customization is kind of broken on Windows 11, so I'm just going to go into settings and change it to dark mode manually. I think it's because I don't have graphics drivers installed, but you can see it still took up a lot of space because it's Windows 11, but about 3 or 4 gigs less than it would normally. Mainly because I've added stuff as well as removing it. But yeah, that is how to make and a demonstration of a custom Windows 11 build, and you'll see if I shut it down, it says shutting down for the first few seconds, but after that you can see it does the verbose shutdown messages instead of just saying shutting down the whole time. So yeah, that was the Windows 11 custom build tutorial and demonstration. If you guys want to see more like this, then let me know, and thanks for watching.